today we wanted to talk about our new release of IMAGINiT Clarity, put out just a couple weeks ago, and we wanted to cover what's new, what we've done within the IMAGINiT Clarity product. We'll just touch on just a quick note of release history, and the themes that we're going to cover in this Clarity 2020.1 release are really around these topics: integrations, some enhancements to the core of Clarity with task automation, some interesting things that we're doing around visualization and data, some enhancements to the user interface, and just sort of other functional enhancements that didn't really fit into one of the other categories. So historically, we have put out 2 releases of Clarity every year, going back all the way to 2013, something along those lines. And generally, our spring release is got a lot of features, but it also has to support the new version of Revit and Revit Server and everything else. And so our fall release is something where we can really focus on just the features, which are generally driven by Clarity clients telling us what they need to make Clarity even better. And especially for those of you who are not that familiar with Clarity, I just want to put up this slide that talks about the sort of solution architecture. When we talk about Clarity, there's sort of the core piece of Clarity, the web application and the ability to set up tasks and define projects and all of those kinds of things. There are some other modules to Clarity. You can have one or more task servers that actually do the actual work that we're going to automate, firing up Revit in the background, doing the work that needs to be done, delivering the files to where they need to go. We also have a specific module for integration with Bentley ProjectWise. We have a specific module called Clarity Security, which if you still use Revit Server and you're interested in having some security added to your Revit Server, we have that sort of module. These Clarity connectors are really some tools that make a Revit Server accelerator a little bit more powerful. But those, as BIM 360 becomes a bigger part of the ecosystem out there, we really see these tools sort of going away or going down to very limited kinds of situations. Firms that can't use the cloud. Really, going forward, BIM 360 is really, we think where that kind of collaboration and control is going to be. But and then we also have a module called Clarity Owner Data Portal, which is a different flavor of Clarity. It just kind of changes the user interface up a little bit and adds a couple more tasks that are specific to building owners rather than AEC firms. So that's the overview of the Clarity infrastructure. Clarity does task automation and all sorts of work specifically with Revit, and our Clarity 2020 products support Revit 2017 through 2020, all of those versions. And then we also have limited support for Revit 2016. If you attach one of an old version of Clarity running 2019.1, you can still attach that kind of task server to a Clarity 2020 Clarity host server, and you can cover your 2016 projects that way. So that's how we get to 5 supported versions rather than just 4. And we hope that's enough. You can tell us at the end if it's really worth our time and energy to go back and support your Revit 2011 projects. I feel sad for you. But yeah, so let's jump into what's new in the Clarity 2020.1 product. We'll look at some things via PowerPoint. I'll switch over and do some things live. But the biggest theme in our Clarity 2020.1 product is the deeper BIM integrations in general, but in particular, some deeper BIM 360 integration, and we'll talk about what that means. We've got an integration now with OneDrive and SharePoint and Microsoft Teams in terms of post-task actions that you can do to deliver files to those platforms. And then we've also got some tasks that work with those platforms as well. We're really excited to have a new integration with the BIMTrack product, which is a great web-based collaboration tool that covers issue tracking and sort of a shared collaboration foundation. We've also done some interesting work that we've never really gotten into before in all our years with Clarity and Revit, which is starting to treat AutoCAD like a first-class citizen. And we're not quite there. It's sort of our first step, but we now have the ability to run AutoCAD scripts as tasks, and we'll take a look at that. And we similarly wanted to up our game in terms of Navisworks. A lot of people have been looking for NWC, or we've had NWC export out of Revit for a long time, but there were still a lot of needs around automation within Navisworks that we weren't covering. We think that we've gotten some deeper coverage now with some new features. So, talking about BIM 360, what do we mean by deeper integration? We've supported BIM 360 for years with Clarity, but there were some things that really were not great. We supported really cloud Revit models. That was our focus area, is the sort of real BIM 360 or C4R cloud Revit models. We didn't really support it if you just uploaded an RVT model, and we've now added support so that those uploaded RVT models, especially if you are getting those from partners or something like that, those can be processed through through Clarity just as if it's a cloud Revit model. So both options are supported. You set up your project and you say whether you want to include uploaded Revit models in your task automation and those kinds of things. Historically, we did a lot of work with Forge to scan your BIM 360 project, and by seeing the data in Forge, that's what let us know that there was a BIM 360 project out there and a model with this particular file name. And when it came to running live models, which we can do inside of Clarity, we were still sort of relying on the published data that was visible in Forge. And so as a result, there were some oddities where you'd sync some changes into your cloud model, but because it wasn't published, it didn't have a new date on it or those kinds of things. Those issues have been cleaned up so that now we actually capture when the model syncs happen, and therefore we can know that this model has changed, and so we've got a bunch of task options where the task will only run if the model's been changed since the last time. That's now based on the sync time rather than just what's been published within BIM 360. We've got some new tasks to better support people using both the BIM 360 Classic glue where we can push other files. We've always had support for pushing Revit files exported to DWF or exported to Navisworks up into glue, but we have some customers that have historically done some uploads of DWG files and other files like that. That is now possible to automate with an out-of-the-box task. We also want to support people who are trying out the new BIM 360 model coordination concept, and in that situation inside of BIM 360 you define model coordination folders, and any file that you push into that folder will automatically be will have interference checking, clash detection run on it inside of model coordination. We had feedback from some of the early users of it that it was kind of a pain to get the live models into there, and so we have a new task that will push models from either BIM 360 live models or BIM 360 published models, whatever you want to do. It will be able to schedule that push from where the models are into the model coordination folder that you pick. And speaking of picking folders, while it's not everywhere, we now have, instead of having to type in the destination folder in BIM 360, there's more places where there's a pop-up menu, and you can browse through and pick the folder that you want to go to the nice way, rather than having to type it in. And finally, on the task automation side, we found that some of our customers who have some 1 or 2 or 3 machines that are doing like all of their BIM 360 work, the collaboration cache folder for the sort of personal accelerator on those machines, it was touching every model everywhere in BIM 360. So really the size of that cache folder was really bulking up. And so we did set up in the Clarity task server task tray the ability to do a periodic cleanup that says if we haven't touched a model within X number of days, you can go ahead and clear the cache out for that model in my collaboration cache, just to save you some space and not run out of space on your task server. So moving on, the OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint Online integration. It's mostly about files, and so OneDrive is obviously all about files. Teams, there's a files section within a Microsoft team setup. And all of these things are really, as you dig into it, they're all SharePoint underneath the covers. And so ultimately, that's what we're offering. We have you authorize via a Microsoft Office 365 set of credentials, which you can assign a different one to each project or however you want to do it. But then within that, you have the ability to set up post-task actions to say, when this task finishes, takes the files that come out of this task and push them into my OneDrive or a SharePoint folder or a Teams folder. You just have to, in the case of OneDrive, we can actually browse through and pick this way. In the case of other ones, you may have to go in and say copy a link from the SharePoint environment or the Teams environment and paste that link in, and then we can work with that. We also have a OneDrive sync task. So if you just need to synchronize back and forth the files that are in OneDrive down to files that are on your network, we've got that built in as well. And these can all be performed on the Windows task service, so not necessarily running inside of Revit to do these tasks, because Revit's not really necessary. So they can be performed just by our Windows service. BIMTrack integration, like I said, we're really excited to be working with the people at BIMTrack. This is just another connection that we have, but once you've made the connection inside your Clarity server, you then have the option to do a couple different things. We hope to build on this over time, but we have the option to take IFC files that you've generated either by the regular IFC export from Revit or the what we call IFC alternate, but it's the open source IFC where you've got more control and more ability to change the settings on the IFC. Either one of those tasks, you can take the output of those and send those IFCs up into your BIMTrack project because they have visualization and tracking of issues and all of those kinds of things. Let's see, and then also we've got a new task specifically for BIMTrack users where if you want to be able to make a backup of your BIMTrack data, all of the BIMTrack data, issues, resolutions, files, anything that's been updated, and make a dated sort of backup, we have a task that can help you with that. We had that request from a couple of our common customers. So AutoCAD, this is a big thing for us. This is something which runs again outside of Revit in our Windows service task processor, and the idea is that any script file that you want to provide to us in AutoCAD, you can run that script file, and you can either deal with which files in AutoCAD is going to run on by yourself, or we can deal with that. You can tell us where the input files are, and we'll read them all. If the script that you have has outputs and you want to send them someplace else, you can tell us where the outputs are, and we'll take care of it. We can then also take those outputs and use the rest of the Clarity platform, like upload those DWG files into BIM 360 or into SharePoint, any of those kinds of things. But ultimately, this is our first foray. It is pretty flexible, but you do have to still work with AutoCAD scripts to do the automation. But just tell us what the script is, and which flavor of AutoCAD we should be running, and whether you want to use the headless AutoCAD Core Console, which is kind of fast, but it only has probably 95% of the features, or if you want to use the full AutoCAD version where you see the windows pop up and it's got access to 100% of what you're used to. So it's something that we're excited to be offering, and we're happy to help you get started when you're ready to move into using Clarity to help with your AutoCAD processes as well. Also, you can use this in conjunction with Revit tasks. So it is possible in some cases to build up a task sequence that says, first do this task in Revit and then do this task in AutoCAD based on what comes out. The Navisworks conversion task. This uses the built-in Navisworks application. You do have to have Navisworks installed on your task server, like a real version of Navisworks, not just the Freedom Viewer. But generally, we have the ability to do all of the command line conversions that can do, making NWD files out of your NWC files, updating an NWD from NWFs. There's about 6 or 7 different things that are technically possible, but ultimately, updating NWCs, NWDs, NWFs, all of those kinds of things is now possible with Clarity to be able to more fully deliver Navisworks automation. So we hope to see this grow further as well, but we hope that this is going to help some people get their Navisworks files and keep them up to date better. All right, so let's move on to the core enhancements. Some of the core enhancements that we have in Clarity 2020.1 include an enhanced scheduling mechanism. We had people ask, historically we've only had weekly tasks or monthly tasks, but the reality is lots of people had every 2 week deliverables or every 3 week deliverables, and so we can now schedule tasks on that kind of basis. To be able to do that, you do have to tell us starting from what date, so that we know which every other week or every third week, it has to be relative to some starting point. So you tell us the starting point, we'll give you a heads up as to when the next runtime is for that task based on these settings, but it's just more flexible of how these things are specified. We've had people asking for a long time about stringing together multiple post-task actions. So rather than just having one post-task action for a task, we now support multiple. So you can, as we're showing down here, you can say at the end of this task, I want to make a copy of the files over to here. I want to upload them to BIM 360, and then I also need to upload them to box.com. So all of those things are now possible, and we can do all of them in sequence. Let's see, we have some companies that are doing file-based projects where, on the really big projects, you might have hundreds of folders and thousands of files underneath your particular project, but only a few of them contain Revit models. And in those kind of situations, it was a little bit painful because we were scanning if you picked the top level folder, you were scanning everything. We had some other workarounds, but they were a little bit painful as well. And so we now have the ability as part of the project definition to say what's the top level folder, but then here are the defined subfolders where you should expect to find Revit models underneath that. And these become much more efficient at what we watch over and what we scan and what gets included or not included, that kind of thing. For our customers that have multiple hosts, so in some cases you might have a Clarity host in North America, but then another one in Europe or something like that. We now have the concept of a master project list. One of your servers will be used to maintain that list of projects across the whole company, and you can go in and search and see where is this project live, and jump right to that project from this environment. And and like we said, there's a variety of task enhancements where we've added some other UI niceties like folder picking and that kind of thing. So moving on to visualization. Some of you may recognize this. It's the kind of diagram that we can do inside of Clarity, either in the reports section, where we, you can say, I want to see a report, and then this looks like doors probably. So show me all the doors on this particular level and phase. So it'll show you where the doors are and show you a report. This kind of information, whether just kind of space layout or equipment, is something that we could use in reports and we could use in data sheets, but it was not really accessible by people who are starting to get into Power BI and that kind of thing to visualize the data outside of Clarity. Well, it was kind of possible in that you could go in and with Power BI you could point at a scalable vector graphics component and read that from our database, but some of this stuff like mixing the equipment locations with the particular level and phase were not possible. So we've now opened this up so that there's now a custom URL that you can use, which will let you bring this kind of reporting on graphical locations into any other system that you want that supports URLs and SVGs and that kind of thing. So different other systems that you might have, you can now pull your Clarity data in and decide what kind of data to include with it or how you want to color different rooms or different pieces of equipment. So lots of different possibilities opened up with this. Another interesting thing that we did was, for file-based projects, there's this great source of data, which is the slog file for each project, and we felt like we ought to be trying to make more usage out of that. And so, this is something where we can now go in, and for any file-based project that you're working on, you'll have an extra field on the end or an extra tab on the end for the timeline where it'll read your slog file and actually the backup slog file that came before that and be able to visualize for you, how many concurrent people are working on this project, showing all of the people who are working over the timeline that you specify and how many, how long were their sessions and are they overlapping? And each one of these little dots is when did they do a sync to central. So you can kind of get some insight as to how people are using Clarity, when they're working, are they, who's got the latest version of it. There's lots of different things that you can tell from it. I'm going to go back for a second and look at it live. So so it's something where you can zoom into it, you can mouse over and see, this was a sync with central that happened at a particular time. So there's lots of insight that you can gain about how many concurrent users you might have in the model at any time, Are there people that have the model open that are not making changes, or at least no sync to centrals? Those kinds of things. So we wanted to give you the more ability, more insight as to what's going on. Let's see, I've mentioned a variety of new tasks already in the context of other enhancements. One of the ones that's not mentioned so far is a Revit schedule export. We actually can export one or more schedules into Excel, directly into Excel, and you can either get one Excel per schedule, or you can get multiple schedules going one per tab into an Excel file. So that's something that you can both export as well as keep that file up to date at all times. So we're excited about that feature. Forge Cloud Task Processing. This is something that we added in the last release, I believe, 2020.0. And the concept is that now that Autodesk has a design automation component of Forge, we have the ability to send Revit models up to the cloud and do work on them in the cloud. And it's a little bit like what we already do with Clarity on-premise, where we send tasks over to a task server that's inside of your office to do the work. This would be an option to take that same work and say, I want to send this work to the cloud. So we wanted to start offering that kind of thing as people want to experiment with it. And so we do sort of orchestrate that via Clarity and the Windows Task Service. And there's a variety of tasks that we already supported, where we could say, I want to send this kind of job up to be processed in the cloud. We've added better support for Revit server projects and better support for links between models, and we've added support for IFC tasks to it. To set this up, I mean, just to set your expectations, it is something where you do need to sign up with Forge so that the charges that Forge hits you up with go to you rather than to us. It is $6 per CPU hour of time to execute your tasks in the cloud via Forge. So it's an area that we think that that people will continue to be interested in, or if you've got credits that you'd like to burn and you'd like to go in and send every historical model that you have through the system and look at it for model metrics or performance advisor, model health kind of things. That's possible. And not tie up your own machine resources to do it. For people who have the Clarity ProjectWise module to integrate ProjectWise with Clarity, we've enhanced the ProjectWise check-in post-task action so that any task that you run, you can turn around and say, take the output of this task and send it into ProjectWise. We enhanced it so that if you're doing something like like trying to migrate data from BIM 360 into ProjectWise with something like our BIM 360 download task, if you've got multiple types of files that are coming through, you can set up a wildcard and say, sort of divert these files. If they match a particular wildcard, then send them to this folder. But if they match a different wildcard, then send them to a different folder. So it can work off extensions or or the file name or whatever you might want to use. But in the case where you're mapping stuff from BIM 360 into ProjectWise, there may be a scenario where you need to put different kinds of files into different ProjectWise subfolders. An enhancement on the Revit server side, as people are starting to step away a little bit from the Revit server security side of things, we have sort of an alternate approach to keeping track of are people changing the files that they're supposed to be changing. This is optional. We can watch over each of your Revit server projects and look and see, is the person who made this change assigned to this project in Clarity? And if it's not a person who's assigned in Clarity, then send out a quick heads up message to the project owners, just saying, by the way, this person made a change and it's not clear if they are actually allowed to make that change. But finally, some model health enhancements. There's a few more metrics that we've added to our model metrics task. I think that puts us up at 65, or high 60s. Things like keeping track of unpinned grids, unpinned levels, some other things as well. We also added some features. Let me jump over into the live session. I'll probably have to sign in again. We also have some features inside of here, which is for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is our screen for project coordinators, showing the projects that you're responsible for. We can drill into this and see which of the metrics that we're capturing that you actually care about as a firm, have sort of red light, green light, kind of issues. Actually, if I switch over for a second, I'll show it to you from this point of view. Oops, this one. So you can see here's the models in the project. We've set up a subset of metrics that we really care about as a firm: number of warnings, imports, in-place families, that kind of thing. And you can see green light, yellow light, red light. But on the across project scale, we can drill in similarly and say, okay, well, what's up with my project today? I can see that these things are red. We have a yellow. We have a white. But what's new is the ability to drill further in and look at the historical data on this. If I click on number of imports, it'll take us to the historical data page within the project so that we can see, okay, well, it looks like we used to have imports at 10 imports in the model. Now we have 22, and that happened around August 22nd. We can look at that. We can also look at things just like the model size over time. We always have that on the screen because that's always interesting. We can see that over the last month or so, this size keeps going up. Might be something where you can tell if the model size goes down that they've done some Revit model maintenance or purging and auditing or that kind of thing. So that you can see that some of those, if it never goes down, then they're probably never doing their basic model maintenance kinds of steps. We also have proactive alerts on all of the model metrics or anything that you care about. So if you wanted to to get an email message saying, hey, if there is if the number of in-place families, we've always had the settings where, if this changes by more than a certain amount or if it crosses some threshold, we added a section that says, we've got a firm standard for this. So if this moves from green to yellow or yellow to red, then send out an email notification just to give a proactive heads up to the coordinator who's responsible for that. We also, sometimes your model names change over time, and we don't necessarily know that that's the same model. And so we have a better UI as well for merging or deleting or cleaning up those kinds of discrepancies where a model name changes and you want to keep that history or you want to purge out that model and not look at the metric data anymore. So some final fine-tuning enhancements, and then I don't know how we're doing on time, but but then we'll open it up for questions. Little things like for multi-page PDF, sorting sheets by natural sort so that A1 and A10 and A100 sort into how you would like them to sort and not how the computer would sort them if left to its own devices, sort of a human-centered sort. For people who want to control just sort of the user interface in terms of being able to add a project or giving instructions to the people in your company about adding a project and what the right process should be. We've got customizable headers now where you can add a header to the top of the Add Project page. We also have it already on the All Projects page just to give people guidance about what they're looking at. Some enhancements to tasks like Publish Revit Model now supports a Discard Work Sets option. Dormant projects, so we don't want to necessarily see you spending your time running scheduled tasks against projects that are not changing. So we do periodically, we scan through and look at projects where the models haven't changed and are we still running scheduled tasks on them. And we've had this for a while, but you couldn't really go in and control like what, how long has it been that we would consider this project to be dormant, and who gets notification and that kind of thing. This is now all much more within your control to define how this should work, or if you want to bother. We've improved our Revit server status page so it's a bit faster and moved it over to another screen so it doesn't always have to come up for those of you with Revit server. Cleaning up old task servers, history, sort of linking a task time, linking from a task server to what tasks this machine's been doing on the task timeline. Lots of little things like that that have been requested by firms that are trying to push it further. So there's a few other, I would say smaller kinds of things, that we've added as well. We also have increased the REST API. So this is a very open API so that you can integrate your other systems with Clarity, or you can automate Clarity. So kinds of things that you can do. You can add a new project to Clarity via the REST API. So if you already have some kind of mechanism that says, hey, whenever we add a new project, we need to set it up in Deltek, set it up in SharePoint, set it up in BIM 360, all of those things, it's possible to tie in your Clarity setup to that, to those automation steps. But that's one of the more common things we've seen so far. But really, anything that you want to do, if you just want to, synchronize your users differently, or kick off a task from a batch file, or any number of things, it's all possible with the Clarity API keys. Actually, there's some of these things that are available. We actually now have a command line script tool. So if you don't actually want to get into the programming, you can run the Clarity scripting tool and actually do some of this basic stuff just at the command line. So lots of different things that you can do, but it's out there. It's better documented than it ever has been before. If you actually go to your Clarity server authentication page, you'll now see the Clarity API keys. You'll be able to set them up, and you'll be able to get to this live documentation where you can actually look at the API documentation and try it out live. So you sign in, and then with whatever credentials you have, you can go in and say, show me the list of projects that I can get, or show me the users. So that, I believe, was everything on the list that I wanted to cover. Clarity 2020.1, it's available now for existing customers. You should have had an email around mid-November, maybe the 15th or 18th, just receiving a link that says, here's how you download it. And it's a pretty easy process to upgrade your existing Clarity server to 2020.1, instead of running a setup.exe and answering a few questions. There is a sample upgrade video to walk you through it, but it's more or less the same video that we had with 2020.0. You just run the upgrade and answer 5 questions, and it should be ready to go. Your 2020.0 license is fully compatible. So if you're coming from 2020.0, no license necessary. If you're coming from an earlier version, you'd have to upgrade as part of it as well. But yeah, if you have questions or want some assistance with it, reach out to support@rand.com and we'll coordinate some help for you.